Hey, philosophy students, how you doing? Hopefully you're doing well. We've got another week here. It's starting to feel like spring outside, which is good. And then hopefully, if you've been paying attention to the news, we'll be able to get through this, at least the peak of it, fairly soon, and then see what happens after that. But hopefully you've been able to kind of follow along a little bit, look at some of the documents that I've put up there. Still waiting to hear from the state of Connecticut in terms of grading and some of those things. We're going to make sure that we pay attention to that. Again, if you do some of the activities I'm putting up and things like that, you won't get caught having to do a bunch of it at the end if if they decide that you're going to need to be graded traditionally. So I'm kind of doing this and putting some things up on the on Google Classroom. So there'll be another sheet with some questions that you can do related to Rene Descartes. We'll talk about him in a minute. But what I want to do first is continue on with Nonsense, the book that we've been kind of dealing with concerning fallacies. And most of these occur in conversations. Not necessarily things you read, but things that we tend to do and say and talk about on an ongoing basis. You will deal with these for the rest of your life. And it will give you a tool to really kind of, not necessarily control conversations, but not be controlled in conversations. It'll give you a step up and a valuable skill I think people will need in terms of argumentation, especially when you hear these things in the workplace. The first one, so an ad hominem attack, maybe you've heard of that, is basically a personal attack on somebody. And one of the ones that occurs a lot in conversation that we often don't pick up on because it sounds right. It often has to do with potential conflicts of interest, things like that. And it's a circumstantial ad hominem, it's known as. So let me give you an example and see if you would say this is a natural reaction someone might have or you've heard a million times, but then looking at what's really going on when this happens. So let's say that a player, a high school student named Tim, isn't good enough to be on the basketball team and is cut from the team. However, the head coach's nephew makes the team. So right away, someone would say that the coach just picked their blood relative to the team and Tim was cut unfairly. So what move was made when someone says that just off the cuff is they have not talked about whether Tim was good enough to be on the team. They have not talked about whether the nephew was better than Tim and deserved to be on the team. Right away, they went right after the character of the coach in this situation, which is an ad hominem attack. It doesn't deal with the merits of the team, what was needed, what was, what Tim's ability level was in comparison to the coach's nephew. And so what it does is it goes right for a straight ad hominem attack, which is fallacious, which is, something that does not deal with the real argument. Okay. Now, it may be true. There may be a situation where that does, in fact, happen. But in that case, the argument would need to be backed up with evidence and proof that this was true. Most of the time, it's not. It's just an ad hominem attack to perhaps make somebody like Tim feel better and have an excuse or to attack somebody. Another one you may be aware of is guilt by association. This is where somebody's ideas or opinions are automatically excluded because of who their friends are or who they've been associated with in the past. And politically, we see this where somebody might be running for an office, for instance. Oh, well, he was a big supporter of you fill in the name. And right away, that's supposed to disqualify the individual. Doesn't deal with the individual's ideas, whether or not that individual would be the best choice for the position. The classic example is somebody in town plays golf with a mafia figure one time that maybe didn't even know he was a mafia figure, but all of a sudden they attack that character because maybe there was a picture that he was taking with the individual, something like that. We see this all the time on social media today. Poisoning the well is another phrase that maybe you've heard. So let me do it in a political context. Candidate so-and-so doesn't do anything, or let's say a mayor or a governor actually, doesn't do anything. All she does is talk. That's all she does. All she does is talk, 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 and nothing ever gets done. Now, let me ask you a question. How is that governor going to defend herself? What if a reporter asks her, did you hear the criticism? Guess what she's doing now? She's talking. So she can't win. It almost sounds like no matter what she does, she's going to feed right into the criticism, which is called poisoning the well. And then the other side could just say, see, I told you. It's similar to a complex question. We'll talk about that, where you entrap the individual. Also kind of a fallacious move. Doesn't talk about, perhaps real specifics there or allow her even to defend herself. Passing the buck. Okay, now we've all done this. Okay, but this is fallacious too. Classic example: somebody's late for work, and maybe an authority figure comes up to that individual and says, "Hey, you were late for work." He's like, "Well, I'm sure you've been late for work before." Okay, right away, that has nothing to do with whether or not you were late for work, right? That's just kind of trying to make the issue something else. Another good example is when a police officer pulls somebody over for speeding, and the person who got pulled over for speeding says something like, "Oh, officer, you've never been guilty of speeding before," or "What about all these other cars that are speeding behind? Look how fast they're going." Neither one of those things has anything to do with the fact that you were speeding and breaking the law. So those are fallacious moves to get out of a situation that you're not happy about. Okay, but it's a fallacy. It doesn't logically work. It's irrelevant. These are all fallacies of irrelevance, by the way. You're trying to bring something in that is irrelevant to the actual thing that's happening right now. And so in politics and in business models and all of this, people try to do this. And if you learn to recognize this, you can see it for what it is. It's fallacious. Those things may be true. There may be people doing 85 miles an hour for you while you're getting your license and registration, but the police officer is dealing with you. And if that was the case, if we had to excuse everybody because somebody else is doing it, all law would break down across the United States. Or if you could point to a mistake that somebody made that is now holding you accountable, well, last time I checked, nobody's perfect, so you could pretty much break down all of society that way too. So these are fallacious moves. The other thing is another one called the counter question. So think of it this way: you get a business pitch. Someone wants to sell you. They're starting a new company, and they want you to invest in their company. And you're listening, and then you say, "Okay, so and so, give me one good reason why I should invest in your company." And they turn around to you and say, "Give me one good reason why you shouldn't." Okay, doesn't deal with the issue at all, and actually, it doesn't give me a positive reason why I should reach into my pocket, pull out money, and invest in your company. So that is something called counter question, which is a fallacy. All right, it's a way to just re-ask a question to avoid the subject and makes it irrelevant. Okay, just because you can't come up with a reason why you shouldn't. Well, if that was the case, there's a million companies that they could say that to you about, or a million things in life that you could spend your money on. It doesn't get you anywhere. And then finally, there's actually not finally, there's a couple more, but the irrelevant reason. So you've heard this with tax plans, right? In a government, they'll say, "We need a new tax plan." Why? Well, the one we have now is too confusing. Okay. Does that mean we should have a new tax plan? It may be confusing, but what does it say? Like what is the purpose of the tax plan? Should we rewrite it so it's less confusing, but still the same tax plan? See, confusing isn't really a reason to create a whole new tax system, right? It may be a reason to rewrite the plan, so it's more, it has more clarity. But this idea of just, coming up with a new tax plan because the old one is too confusing is fallacious. It's irrelevant. Non sequitur. Okay. So a non sequitur is the idea it doesn't follow. They give you a reason for something, but it doesn't follow what the real issue is. So a celebrity comes on, a famous movie actress, and she says, You know, you may not realize it, but when I come before the camera, I still get nervous. That's why I use Pepident teeth whitener. It always works for me. Okay, a couple things. One, just because somebody is nervous before the camera, there's not an automatic connection there between that and a teeth whitener. Not sure how that relates. The hidden assumption is that perhaps it gives her more confidence, something like that. But the non sequitur there, if I whiten my teeth, I won't be nervous in front of the camera. And it also doesn't mean that it'll work for you. That may be her thing that she's kind of implicitly, kind of telling you there. But it's a non sequitur because it doesn't mean it'll work for you. And basically, what a product is doing is just, putting a celebrity out there, and to basically sell the product. Another fallacy of this type of irrelevance is this idea of appeal to force. If you don't cooperate, we'll hold you in contempt of court. Okay, that gives me a consequence of what's going to happen if I don't cooperate, but it really doesn't give me a good reason why I should. What is the reason why I should engage in this behavior other than the consequences? Because the consequences just tell me what you're going to do and what I'm going to have to endure. It doesn't really tell me why I should, in this case, answer the question or whatever the other case may be. So that's an appeal to force. Okay, so it doesn't really, it just talks about the consequences as opposed to the reason. Or how about appeal to ignorance? This is one you hear a lot. We think that the government in Hartford is corrupt. Well, you don't have a piece of evidence for that, and therefore it's not corrupt. It's a great place. Well, okay, so a couple things. One, the burden of proof should be on the person that is making the claim. That's a real consistent thing in our argumentation that should happen. The other thing, though, just because you don't have a piece of evidence doesn't mean that that is not in fact the case. Okay, so just because I can't produce evidence, while you shouldn't believe me if my argument doesn't have anything to back it up, it also could be true. I just haven't found the evidence yet. The conspiracy to commit anything, it could be a conspiracy. But until you show me evidence to support that, I don't have to believe that. But I can't, on the other hand, say there's absolutely, in this case, absolutely, there's no corruption in state government. Okay, well, there may be, but the issue is it's irrelevant because we don't have the evidence. Okay. All right, now metaphysics. Let's switch gears. Metaphysics, what is real? We talked about the four causes of Aristotle, so hopefully you've had a chance to kind of look at that. And what he came up with. We knew what the pre-Socratics kind of looked at. First group to really look at non-mythological reasons for what is real, for what goes on in our world. René Descartes, okay, it's not Descartes. So people have said that in the past, make him sound like an explorer of some kind. He's not. He's French. It's Descartes, okay? There's a really bad philosophical joke that I'll share with you when we get to epistemology. I won't do it now. He was famous. He's called actually the father of modern philosophy because he came up with a system and he kind of used it. All right. He tutored Queen Christina of Sweden in philosophy in 1649. He eventually passed away at somewhat of a young age at 54. He's the guy in philosophy books. You look at him, he almost looks like he could be a lead guitarist for one of those 1980s glam rock bands. Got a little mustache, but he was a pretty bright guy, and he does get deep and complicated. I have found him. I can read him. I can understand. There's some philosophers who really they're brutal to read. René Descartes, I was always able to. Okay, I see where he's going with this. So I don't know if you'll have the same experience, but I am going to upload an excerpt from I think it's Meditation 6, which deals with this topic. I think you'll get it. But he is famous because he dealt with the issue. So when we talk about what is real, he dealt with the issue of the mind and the body. Okay. And he's going to argue that your mind and your body are two separate things. Okay. Now, a lot of you are like, no kidding. However, a big split in philosophy, and even if you go to the eastern part of the world, this is not no kidding. And even today, in scientific circles, the mind and the body, some would argue that there is no such thing as the mind, that it's just all the chemical reactions that occur in the brain. It's what we use to describe that thing. So there is quite a debate today. But I think I may have asked you, I think most of you think mind is real, even though it's not tangible or physical. Most of you, if I remember right. But that's the idea that Descartes said. He said mind and body are two separate things. So he's called a dualist. Okay, we'll talk about Spinoza next time, who's a monist. Okay, so dual, two. All right, an easy kind of analogy. What's the minimum people you need to have a duel? Well, you need two. Okay, I guess you could duel with yourself, but that's they usually some people be very concerned about you if you're doing that. But usually two people. Okay, a dualist. So mind and body are two separate things, but they work together. So he argued that events in the physical body can cause events in the non-physical mind and vice versa. So you're aware of this, that things that happen in your mind cause your body to do things. And then if things happen in your body, it can cause your mind to respond to that as well. He uses thought to refer to mind and substance to refer to body. So when he talks about thought, he's talking about your mind. And when he talks about substance, he's talking about your body. Okay? These two substances, mind and body, do not need each other to understand each other. So if I talk to you about your mind, what's on your mind? You would probably answer that pretty quickly. Okay? If I were to say, something about your body, your arm or your leg, you would get that too. You wouldn't need, you can understand your body without even mentioning your mind. And you could talk to me about your mind without even mentioning your body. So since that's true, Descartes argued that that's how you know that those are two separate things. You don't need one to explain the other. Some scientists may disagree with that if they're materialists and say, yes, you do. And so on and on the debate and argument go. Okay. Now, he argued that humans have mind and body, but animals do not. So he said that humans essentially attach human characteristics to animals because they see them behave in ways that remind them of the way humans behave. But really, they are just instinct. They're physical bodies and they're instinctual. Okay, so instinctive, I don't even know if instinctual is a word, but and I'll let you kind of wrestle with that. Do you think that's true? If animals have a mind, what is it like? How's it different from humans' minds? When you say mind, do you mean instinct? Do you mean that they react to stimuli? What evidence do you have that, and then some people will get into studies and things like that animals display behavior when they're happy, sad, content, scared, lonely. It gets into a whole field of study. So the question comes up, if mind and body are two separate things and we know that they impact each other, how do they work together? Okay, that's a big, even today, we're still wrestling with that. The power the mind has over the body and the power the body has over the mind. Okay, well, in kind of an analogy, Descartes uses a pilot and a ship. So for our 21st century analogy, think of it as a driver and a car. Obviously, they didn't have cars when Descartes was around, so he used a ship. But the idea that the driver can focus on pure thought while also directing the car. So the mind can think about pure thought while also directing our bodies. So if I raise my right arm, okay, I had a thought, according to Descartes, in my mind that caused me to control my body. Okay. Well, if that arm that I just raised hit something above me, or I was stung by something in this room that was bad, my mind would be impacted by that. I'd be depressed. I'd be nervous. I'd start thinking about things that I needed to do. Right. So some of these issues are like that. And so the mind, even though the driver's in the car, the driver can be impacted by what goes on in the car, right? car fire or, something like that happens. So they asked Descartes, they said, well, how do they work together? Where do they work together? And Descartes basically says the pineal gland. And it's kind of one of those things that people laugh at because he just kind of made it up. I mean, I don't know if he completely made it up, but it's been said, that he didn't have a lot of real good evidence to support that, but that he knew enough about the body, about a pineal gland, and his best guess said that may be where they work together, in the pineal gland. And some people really criticized him for that because there wasn't real good evidence for that. I think the pineal gland has some different uses in terms of the energy. I'm not even sure, but I remember it had something to do with the energy in your body and some of those other things that go on in the pineal gland. But you can look that up. You may know that from your biology class. But he kind of just made that up, and so it kind of had an impact on him. But what he is known for is his discussion of the mind and the body and the dualism. That even today, now he did this way back in the 17th century, and many of his arguments are still used today. So that's why he's been called the father of modern philosophy. So in metaphysics, he's going to argue dualism. Spinoza, who we'll talk about next time, comes around and talks about monism. So mono meaning one. Okay, so think of it that way. Okay, so that's it for now. I will upload Descartes' Meditation 6. And so there's some questions that correspond to that. If you would, fill those in. And then hopefully I'll see you again soon, virtually. Friday is a no school day. These are all no school days in one sense, but it's a holiday. So I'll probably give you one other activity this week, and then we'll go from there. Okay. Again, email me if you need anything. I miss you, and I'm going to say that to you every time because I do. And I really wish we could be together to kind of have discussions, and that would be really cool. Anyways, that's it for now. Take care of yourselves. They're saying if we continue this protocol for a short time, a couple weeks maybe, we could really make a huge difference in maybe getting back to normalcy. I'm not a doctor, but we'll see what happens, okay? Know I'm thinking about you, and hope everything's well. And email me if you need anything. Okay, if you just want to say hi, that's cool. If you want to just, anything. So, until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and talk to you soon.